In the story of poverty, there are two main types: extreme and relative poverty. Extreme poverty means not having the basics like food, shelter, education, and healthcare, experienced by those living on less than $1.99 per day. Throughout history, communities naturally formed to meet these basic needs. Unfortunately, these basic needs do not apply to many Africans. To compare countries' wealth, we look at something called gross domestic product per capita. As of 2023, Africa's average GDP is the lowest among all continents, standing at less than $9,700. Despite having lots of resources like land, forests, sunlight, minerals, and people, Africa still struggles with poverty. There are 54 countries in Africa, each with the potential to use its resources for prosperity. The root of Africa's poverty issue traces back to a historical story told by Walter Rodney in 1972. He explained how European colonial powers deliberately exploited and underdeveloped Africa, thinking of African nations as Europe's kitchens and its people as subjects. Jumping to today, the ongoing poverty situation in Africa is puzzling. Since Namibia gained independence in 1990, Africa should have moved towards prosperity. However, the reality is different. Leadership plays a big role, with many African nations having leaders who lack the skills needed. The effects of historical oppression still linger, now seen in the form of corrupt leadership. Leadership in African nations often involves power struggles driven by wealth and force. Military interventions, coups, and disruptions in civil order add to the continent's challenges, making it harder to overcome economic hardships. This leadership problem needs attention if Africa is going to meet the basic needs of its people like food, shelter, education, healthcare, and security. Navigating the economic terrain of Africa involves a nuanced analysis, categorizing nations based on their growth rates. Let's start off by dividing African countries into two main groups: those experiencing robust growth, 5% or higher, and those with weaker growth, less than 5%. We can further divide within each growth category, distinguishing non-resource intensive, oil exporting, and other resource-intensive economies. A glance at growth data spanning the years 2013 to 2023 reveals a notable trend among the 41 scrutinized countries. A total of 18 nations have surged ahead with growth rates of 5% or higher, representing a promising outlook for the continent. Impressively, this upward trajectory spans all three economic types, showcasing the diversity in Africa's development strategies. Notably, the majority of the robust growth economies, 8 out of 18, fall under the non-resource intensive category, challenging conventional expectations. The pivotal question arises: why do certain African countries thrive while others grapple with economic challenges? Historically, commodities have been the architects of Africa's economic fate. Fluctuations in commodity prices wield significant influence. High prices coincide with economic prosperity, while declines contribute to setbacks. Despite Africa's substantial reserves, comprising a third of the planet's mineral resources, a tenth of its oil, and two-thirds of its diamonds, the continent paradoxically remains the poorest. Diverse perspectives exist regarding the causes of Africa's economic disparities. Some attribute it to the lingering influence of former colonial powers intentionally keeping the continent impoverished. Others point fingers at internal factors, emphasizing corruption and governance issues. Contrary to these narratives, research from McKinsey & Company paints a more optimistic picture. It suggests that Africa is outperforming expectations, leveraging its diversity to create opportunities. To unravel the complexities of Africa's economic landscape, it's essential to delve into the unique paths taken by similar countries. These trajectories offer valuable lessons, shedding light on the strategies that contribute to positive growth. By understanding these dynamics, we can gain insights into the forces shaping Africa's economic narrative and explore avenues for sustainable development. At the forefront, Kenya and Tanzania, two nations with comparable economies upon gaining independence in the early 1960s. Both initially opted for authoritarian one-party states, suppressing democracy. However, their economic paths diverged sharply. Tanzania, under the banner of African socialism, nationalized major companies and enforced collective farming. In contrast, Kenya embraced free markets, encouraging investment and implementing regulatory reforms. Today, Kenyans find themselves 80% wealthier than Tanzanians, showcasing the impact of divergent economic strategies. Zooming in on Zimbabwe and Botswana, both led by distinct political leaders, their economic fortunes also tell a tale of disparate choices. In the early 1980s, Zimbabwe was economically superior, but Robert Mugabe's rule led to economic ruin through reckless printing of banknotes and authoritarian measures. Meanwhile, Botswana under Seretse Khama pursued an ambitious economic agenda centered around beef, copper, and diamonds. Stringent anti-corruption measures were implemented. Consequently, Botswana's wealth now surpasses Zimbabwe's by a factor of 9. A shining star in Africa's economic landscape is Mauritius. Despite initial predictions of a developmental dead end due to heavy reliance on sugar agriculture and vulnerability to trade shocks, Mauritius defied expectations. The Mauritian economic miracle saw sustained growth attributed to foreign direct investment transforming the economy. Sensible economic policies played a crucial role, but equally important was the resilience of institutions, maintaining stability, adherence to the rule of law, and low corruption levels. Contrasting this success is Madagascar, Mauritius's large neighbor with richer natural resources. In the 1970s, as Mauritius attracted foreign investors, Madagascar opted for a socialist approach, centralizing its economy and seizing land. The consequence was investor expulsion, nationalization, and a severe economic collapse. Madagascar, in contrast to its potential, became one of the few countries in the world to become poorer over the years, highlighting the perils of ill-fated economic choices. While sensible economic policies are vital, success hinges on more than that. The African landscape is scattered with countries attempting to attract foreign investment and boost manufacturing. Only a handful, including Ethiopia, Lesotho, and South Africa, succeeded. Mauritius stands as a testament to the importance of resilient institutions, maintaining stability and upholding integrity, a stark contrast to the challenges faced by Madagascar, revealing the intricate dance between policies and their implementation in shaping Africa's economic destiny. But the question remains, why are some countries in Africa so poor? One explanation that surfaces is the curse of riches, an irony where abundant natural resources seem to have little positive impact on the quality of life for many Africans. Despite more than 5 decades since the end of colonial times, African governments, in their pursuit of lifting people from extreme poverty, often appear clueless, and change seems further and further away. For starters, modern-age colonialism emerges as a significant impediment to Africa's economic growth and development. This form of colonialism, characterized by full or partial control exerted by powerful nations over another country, hinders economic autonomy. Africa, rich in natural resources, finds itself under the control of influential nations, impacting its economic growth. Policies imposed by former colonial powers have forced reliance on imported goods, siphoning away natural resources and hindering local economic growth. Lack of transparency further adds to the issue. Illegal trade, underreported production, corruption, and tax evasion plague the continent, contributing to a significant gap between projected and actual diamond production. While Botswana stands out as a model with a robust governance system channeling profits back into communities, other nations suffer from corruption, concentrating wealth at the top and depriving the poor of essential services. Bureaucratic corruption remains another huge issue, hindering economic development by preventing the poor from accessing government support. The widening gap between the rich and poor exacerbates the problem, with corruption prevalent at various levels of the political system. Lack of education is another critical challenge. Limited access to quality education impedes progress and perpetuates poverty. Evidence suggests that education directly impacts poverty, with individuals possessing essential skills more likely to secure high-paying jobs. Despite Africa's wealth and natural resources, the lack of education hampers informed decision-making and economic development. Rapid population growth further complicates the situation, with a rising population contributing to poverty. Despite campaigns by humanitarian agencies, the birth rate remains high, forcing more people to live in extreme conditions. A report by UNICEF predicts the population of Africa to double to 2 billion people by the end of 2050. Inequalities in health also play a role, with negative socioeconomic factors contributing to rising health disparities. Expensive healthcare services, unhygienic living conditions, and lack of essential services result in the rapid spread of diseases, further impacting poverty. Multinational companies, particularly Western-based mining firms, face accusations of exploiting sub-Saharan Africa's natural wealth. Issues such as tax evasion, environmental pollution, bribery, and a lack of transparency regarding mining rights contribute to significant losses for African nations, exemplified by Zambia's paradox of having the largest copper mines but remaining one of the poorest countries. Unskilled labor, a consequence of poor education and insufficient investment in training and development, prevails in Africa. The absence of skilled personnel in sectors like diamond mining results in low-quality final products, hindering economic growth. Serious human rights violations compound the challenges, especially in the mining sector. Exploitation, unethical practices, and unsafe working conditions prevail, with weak regulatory frameworks allowing mining firms to prioritize profits over human well-being. The plight extends to a large population of trafficked children working in hazardous conditions in mines and quarries, enduring physical and sexual exploitation daily. In unraveling the complex problems facing Africa, from corruption to lack of education and human rights abuses, addressing these systemic issues is paramount for sustainable development and a brighter future for the continent. But for now, the wealth gap between countries is only widening.